El Chapo may be locked up in one of the most secure prisons in the world, but his influence hasn't faded. The famous drug lord has always had a message for those who dare to challenge him, and this includes the elite forces tasked with dismantling his empire. In his latest warning, El Chapo sends a message of fear, from plans to launch the deadliest attacks ever seen on the U.S. to fresh threats on border agents and U.S. officials. This video exposes the chilling details of El Chapo's latest warning to U.S. troops. El Chapo's warning to U.S. troops. Mexican cartel members recently sent a warning to U.S. troops. Their message? We do not care. After Trump made promises to declare war on Mexican drug cartels, some members of these organizations have openly announced that they remain unbothered by whatever Trump has promised to do. They have also warned that any kind of war against them could lead to violent retaliation. While these warnings have been particularly disturbing, there's something else that makes the announcement even more worrisome. This is the speculation that El Chapo, former Sinaloa cartel leader, may be behind this warning. El Chapo was a former drug lord and leader of one of the biggest drug cartels in Mexico. He is believed to be responsible for the deaths of over 34,000 people, overseeing mass cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana, and heroin production. El Chapo was considered to be the most powerful drug trafficker in the world until he was extradited to the United States and sentenced to life in prison. He was considered a king in Mexican cartel business, which means the drug lord's latest warning cannot be taken for granted. U.S. President Donald Trump has revealed plans to send U.S. special operators to the border to go after Mexican drug cartels. He plans to send experts on the cartels and warfare with the aim of bringing down Mexican cartels and destroying the U.S. drug trade. Trump floated the idea of military intervention in Mexico during his first term in office. However, the plan didn't kick-start at the time. Now, Trump's team appears to be considering the idea more seriously. The president's new national security advisor, Mike Waltz, has pushed the idea of using special operators. Likewise, Trump's border czar Tom Homan has said that special operations forces could be used to take the cartels out, or in his words, take them off the face of the earth. The plan is to launch direct action raids on Mexican cartels. This would involve hard-hitting missions that may likely bring disastrous consequences. However, despite the imminent danger, Mexican cartels appear to be largely unbothered by Trump's threats, and there are a few possible reasons for this. First, cartels operate as powerful paramilitary organizations with vast financial resources, global supply chains, and sophisticated logistical networks. Second, cartels are citizens of Mexico, which means they have better influence in the country. This influence could provide them with the needed connections to fight against the U.S. And let's not forget the intense violence that is likely to erupt. Cartels have a history of retaliating against direct government actions. This was seen in 2019 when the Sinaloa cartel attacked Mexican security forces after the capture of Ovidio Guzman. Their violent retaliation forced the drug lord's eventual release. Given this history, experts argue that cartels would likely respond aggressively to any U.S. intervention rather than be intimidated by Trump's threats. Recently, new reports made the news about how border agents may be at risk of facing new threats. The report suggested that as President Donald Trump steps up border security and deportation efforts, agents with Customs and Border Protection, CBP, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, are likely going to find themselves under threats. These comments came after it was reported that CBP agents will no longer wear body cameras during field operations. This action was in response to a now deleted post on Reddit that claimed body cams could help people track agents who are wearing the cameras. The Reddit post revealed that attackers could use an application called BLE Radar, which uses Bluetooth to scan for devices within a 100-yard radius. This new discovery somehow defeats the original purpose of these body cams. While the device was presented as a way to help immigrants find soft spots on the border, it also opens up agents to different threats, and this includes threats from explosive devices. While speaking on the subject, a security agent noted that cartels could make use of the tracking information to threaten the lives of agents. The officer noted these groups could use the cameras to track the agents and harm or attack them. Drug lords like El Chapo are often willing to go the extra mile to protect their cartels, and this means they're willing to use any method, violent or not, to protect the integrity of their empires. Now you may ask, but El Chapo is in prison? While that is correct, there are cases where drug lords still run cartel businesses even from prison. El Chapo is currently serving a life sentence at ADX Florence, a supermax prison in Colorado, known for its extreme isolation. Given the prison's strict conditions, running cartel operations from behind bars would be extremely difficult, but of course it's not entirely impossible. Despite these restrictions, history shows that cartel leaders have found ways to continue influencing their organizations from prison. A good example is Miguel Gallardo, popularly called the Godfather. Gallardo continued to run cartel operations from a Mexican prison after his 1989 1999 arrest. He maintained control by delegating power to trusted lieutenants, including the founders of the Sinaloa and Juarez cartels. Despite being isolated, he passed orders through lawyers, bribed guards, and visitors. Similarly, Ociel Guillon of the Gulf Cartel also wielded much power in prison. He used smuggled cell phones and bribed prison officials to allow him to communicate with cartel members. These moves kept his influence even while he was behind bars. While El Chapo's direct involvement is unlikely, the drug lord could still influence cartel activities in indirect ways, probably through his sons who also control factions of the Sinaloa cartel. In 2023, El Chapo sent a letter that made officials suggest he's plotting another escape. During the drug lord's 2 years at the Chicago prison, he wasn't once allowed to the rooftop sports courts to exercise. According to prison authorities, there was too much risk that El Chapo would be picked off by a sniper or would stage a helicopter escape. While in prison, El Chapo has sent a series of letters. In one of his letters, the drug lord specifically asked for his phone call privileges and visitation rights to be restored, claiming that his access to phone calls had been cut off since May 2023 without any explanation. The letter, dated March 20th, 2024, was addressed to Judge Brian Cogan, the same judge who sentenced him to life in prison in 2019. In this handwritten letter, El Chapo argued that he is being subjected to what he calls unprecedented discrimination. He requested that his wife, Emma Coronel, be allowed to visit him and bring their twin daughters. El Chapo further expressed frustration that despite his compliance with prison regulations, he was being denied basic rights that other inmates at the facility are granted. He also criticized the Bureau of Prisons, BOP, for allegedly cutting off his ability to make 2 15-minute phone calls per month, which had previously been approved. While El Chapo was making these requests, U.S. officials were monitoring for any signs of a possible escape attempt. Given the drug lord's history, having orchestrated 2 high-profile prison escapes in Mexico, authorities remain on high alert for any indication that he could attempt a third breakout. In 2001, El Chapo escaped from the Puente Grande maximum security prison in Jalisco, Mexico. He allegedly pulled it off by bribing guards to smuggle him out in a laundry cart. His second escape in 2015 was even more sophisticated. The Sinaloa cartel constructed a mile-long tunnel beneath the Altiplano prison in Mexico, allowing El Chapo to flee on a modified motorcycle. That escape humiliated the Mexican government and led to a massive manhunt that ended in his capture in early 2016. Given this history, U.S. authorities take any potential escape threat seriously. Even more, they consider any threat of violence as a wake-up call to stay vigilant. While the United States is expected to take critical measures to protect its military troops, there are a few important factors to consider, and one of these is El Chapo's influence in the U.S. drug trade. El Chapo and the U.S. drug trade. El Chapo was a key figure in the U.S. drug trade before he was incarcerated in U.S. prison. He's considered one of the most powerful drug lords to ever exist. As the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo built a vast trafficking empire that smuggled massive amounts of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana into the United States. His cartel's influence extended beyond North America, with operations reaching Europe, Asia, and beyond. In the early 21st century, El Chapo was believed to be responsible for most of the marijuana and cocaine trafficked from Colombia and Mexico to the United States. He oversaw the smuggling of narcotics to wholesale distributors in Arizona, Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, New York, and several other places. He was also considered the largest smuggler of methamphetamine in the Asia-Mexico-U.S. triangle, with a net worth estimated at $1 billion, according to Forbes. His cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, reportedly had an annual revenue of $3 billion, adding to the drug lord's overall net worth. At the height of his power in the 2000s and early 2010s, El Chapo's estimated net worth was around $12 billion. He had also trafficked over $14 billion worth of drugs into the United States. However, due to asset seizures and the ongoing crackdown on his financial networks, his wealth has dwindled significantly in later years. Despite his eventual incarceration, El Chapo's influence in the drug trade did not completely vanish. In fact, reports suggest the Sinaloa cartel remains one of the most dominant drug trafficking organizations in the world. The cartel continues to generate substantial profits, despite the leadership war that brought new cartel figures into power. This includes El Chapo's sons, often referred to as Los Chapitos. After El Chapo's arrest, his sons took control of a significant fraction of the Sinaloa cartel. They rapidly expanded their drug trafficking operations, shifting the cartel's focus to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is far more potent and profitable than heroin. El Chapo's sons built a fentanyl empire that has been poisoning America America. Their role in flooding the U.S. with fentanyl has been catastrophic, contributing to a crisis that has claimed thousands of lives annually. Unlike traditional drugs such as cocaine or heroin, which require large-scale cultivation, fentanyl is synthetically manufactured in labs using chemical precursors from China. This allows for greater efficiency, reduced risks, and higher profit margins. The Los Chapitos recognized fentanyl's profitability and began producing it on an industrial scale, establishing labs across Sinaloa and other cartel-controlled territories. Despite public claims that they have banned fentanyl production, the DEA and other intelligence sources indicate that Los Chapitos remains central to the trade, using different tactics to dominate the market. They have eliminated independent fentanyl producers with the aim of maintaining a monopoly, taking over labs, and executing those who resist their control. At first, El Chapo's arrest was a huge blow to the U.S. drug trade. His absence had caused a serious power struggle, which shook the affairs of the cartel. However, the impact of his arrest doesn't last for so long. The Sinaloa cartel under Los Chapitos developed advanced smuggling methods to move fentanyl into the United States. They hide fentanyl in legal shipments such as seafood, avocados, and manufactured goods. They also disguise the drug as prescription pills like OxyContin, Xanax, and Adderall, making it harder to detect. In October 2023, banners known as Narcomantis appeared in Sinaloa. It was allegedly signed by Los Chapitos, claiming they were banning the production, sale, and transportation of fentanyl in their territory. The message suggested they disapproved of fentanyl and blamed the government for failing to stop the real culprits. However, while they sought to paint a picture to the public, analysts believe this was a deceptive move. Even cartel insiders revealed that Los Chapitos were not stopping fentanyl production, but instead eliminating rival producers to consolidate control. The DEA and other agencies later confirmed that fentanyl production in Sinaloa has not stopped, and there is no evidence of a real shift in cartel policy. The effects of Los Chapitos' fentanyl empire have been devastating. According to reports, in 2023 alone, over 75,000 Americans died from fentanyl-related overdoses, making it the leading cause of death for adults aged 18-45. Following this death toll, which has been attributed to fentanyl trade in the United States, the U.S. government has intensified its campaign against Los Chapitos and other drug lords, offering multi-million-dollar rewards for information leading to their capture. The DEA, FBI, and Department of Justice have also prioritized the dismantling of Los Chapitos' fentanyl networks. Following recent announcements from U.S. President Donald Trump, experts are predicting that the U.S. drug trade chain would likely collapse in no time. Trump and his allies have floated the idea of using special forces to conduct operations in Mexico, similar to counterterrorism efforts in the Middle East. If this happens, then there will be a lot of change in the U.S.-Mexico drug trade. One immediate consequence would be the disruption of cartel supply chains. The Sinaloa cartel and Jalisco New Generation cartel dominate the trafficking of fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine into the U.S. If Trump's actions successfully ruin key cartel operations, then the flow of drugs, particularly fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, into the U.S. could be severely disrupted, at least in the short term. Another thing is increased violence and unregulated drug markets. Cracking down on major cartels could create power vacuums, leading to increased cartel violence. This happened in Mexico after authorities arrested top cartel leaders in the past, causing smaller groups to compete for control. While this may seem in line with what Trump wants, there are also possible dangerous effects on the U.S. First, if Mexican cartels were significantly weakened, U.S.-based drug production could increase to compensate for supply shortages. Already, domestic production of methamphetamine, synthetic opioids, and counterfeit pills has been growing, and further disruptions to cartel supply lines could accelerate this trend. In the end, this could lead to more dangerous homemade drug production in labs. Similarly, while Trump's proposed actions might weaken certain Mexican cartels, it would also likely benefit others. This includes South American drug producers who could step in to fill the void with direct trafficking routes, Asian criminal organizations which already play a major role in fentanyl production, as well as European traffickers who might increase shipments of synthetic drugs and cocaine to U.S. markets. And let's not forget the possibility of cartels bouncing back and adapting. Despite potential setbacks, history has shown that cartels are highly adaptable. When Mexican and U.S. authorities increased pressure on cartel operations in the past, traffickers quickly adjusted by either shifting smuggling routes or using smaller and harder to detect networks. So even if Mexico's largest criminal organizations were weakened, the demand for drugs in the U.S. would still drive new supply chains and criminal organizations to fill the void. Plus, the division of cartels could lead to increased instability and violence, potentially making drug trafficking even harder to control. Trump wants to get rid of cartels. He plans to to eliminate drug lords and ruin drug empires. But while he's all set to begin, what could possible reactions from drug lords be? Let's talk about that. Possible actions from El Chapo and Mexican drug lords. In a recent statement, Laura Reese, director of the Heritage Foundation's Border Security and Immigration Center, noted that Trump's acts at the border are causing cartels to lose their businesses. She mentioned that the encounters at the border are at the lowest they've been in decades, adding that cartels are not just going to give up their business quietly. Following Trump's proposed plans for cartels, experts have suggested that cartel leaders are very likely to fight back. In the first decade of the 21st century, the Sinaloa cartel engaged in bloody battles with rival cartels and Mexican law enforcement authorities. This fight claimed the lives of tens of thousands of people. Likewise, in 2006, a full-scale confrontation against the drug cartels by the Mexican army also resulted in the arrests of many traffickers. If Trump follows through on his threats, Mexican cartels are unlikely to retreat quietly. They could retaliate by targeting U.S. personnel, escalating violence within Mexico, or even increasing drug trafficking operations as a countermeasure. One thing the U.S. is probably not considering is that the Mexican trade still has enough finances despite El Chapo's incarceration. Cartels generate billions annually from selling cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl, particularly in the U.S. The synthetic drug trade, especially fentanyl, has become a major moneymaker due to its high potency and low production cost. According to data from 2016, drug prices also rise significantly during transit as intermediaries demand compensation for the risk they take in getting the product to consumers. This payment scheme is what makes drugs so expensive on the streets and so profitable for the people who trade them. However, while drug trafficking remains cartels' primary source of income, these organizations have also expanded into other industries, including agriculture, fuel theft, extortion, and even cryptocurrency transactions. Unlike before, the immense financial power of the Mexican drug trade now comes from cartels' ability to diversify revenue streams beyond just narcotics. Many businesses in Mexico, including the avocado and tortilla industries, are forced to pay protection fees to cartels. Similarly, tortilla businesses, a staple of the Mexican diet, are also targeted, with nearly 15% of businesses being forced to pay weekly extortion fees. And then there's the part of fuel theft and money laundering. Cartels steal fuel from pipelines and resell it, causing billions in losses for the Mexican government. Likewise, they are increasingly using cryptocurrencies like Tether to move and launder money. Digital currencies allow cartels to quickly transfer funds across borders while avoiding traditional banking methods. The combination of these diverse revenue streams allows cartels to operate like multinational corporations, ensuring their financial power remains intact even when law enforcement cracks down on drug shipments. Plus, there are big drug lords like El Chapo who are probably still funding cartel activities. Even though he is currently serving a life sentence, El Chapo's influence over the Sinaloa cartel has not disappeared completely. The drug lord's wealth is still probably used somewhere by his cartel members. While Trump's threats may sound aggressive, cartels have faced military crackdowns before and adapted each time. So unless the U.S. takes a more comprehensive approach that addresses both supply and demand issues, cartel violence is unlikely to be resolved through force alone. Some analysis suggests that instead of military intervention, the U.S. should focus on reducing domestic drug demand and improving cooperation with Mexico, both in terms of intelligence and law enforcement. The argument is that Trump's approach oversimplifies the problem. The U.S. itself plays a significant role in the drug trade, not just as a consumer market, but also through financial institutions that facilitate money laundering. So critics claim that the United States is using the cartel narrative to justify potential military interventions, which could destabilize Mexico even further. Already, militarization has led to more than 100,000 disappearances in Mexico since 2006, with many victims being from vulnerable communities. In addition to the violence that has already occurred, there is a tendency for Mexican citizens to face even more dangerous situations if this drug war escalates beyond measure. New reports are suggesting that if El Chapo and Mexican drug lords attack, the U.S. will not back down. According to a recent report, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, could take on a larger role in battling Mexican drug cartels under Trump's administration. Sources claim that CIA Director John Ratcliffe plans to shift agency resources to its counter-narcotics mission and disrupt the cartel networks. He intends to use lessons learned in counter-terrorism operations and apply them to this cartel mission. When the U.S. fights back, cartels cartels are likely to take actions that may involve releasing El Chapo from prison. The drug lord has already escaped prison twice, so it's highly possible that he plans to make a similar move again. However, while these plans may be on the way, there are experts that suggest that if El Chapo ends up escaping, the U.S. may trick and capture him just like they did El Mayo. El Mayo, one of the Sinaloa cartel bosses, was reportedly tricked into U.S. custody by Joaquin Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's son. According to sources, Guzman Lopez convinced Zambada to board a plane under the pretense of inspecting real estate or clandestine airfields in Mexico. However, once on board, El Mayo was flown straight to the U.S., where he was detained by authorities. While some speculate that El Mayo willingly surrendered as part of a secret deal, others argue that he was kidnapped and forcibly taken to the U.S. against his will. Given this precedent, if El Chapo were to attempt another prison break, U.S. authorities could exploit internal cartel wars, deception, or even stage negotiations to lure him into a trap. They might leverage members of his own cartel rivals to apprehend him, probably exploiting their desire for revenge. If Mexican cartels continue to fight back, then Trump may fully enforce his plan to label Mexican drug cartels as terrorists. The Foreign Terrorist Organization label has been described by many as unusual, mainly because it deploys a terrorist designation normally reserved for groups like Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State group. It is designed for groups that use violence for political ends, not for money-focused crime rings such as the Latin American cartels. However, while critics have raised concerns, the Trump administration argues that the international connections and operations of Mexican cartels, including drug trafficking, migrant smuggling, and violent pushes to extend their territory, all warrant the designation. Already, the U.S. has added 6 Mexican cartels to its list of foreign terrorist organizations. Mexico's 2 biggest organized crime groups, the Jalisco New Generation and Sinaloa cartels, were among those added, and so were Tren de Aragua and Mara Salvatrucha, groups with ties to Venezuela and El Salvador. Although it's unclear how the designation will change U.S. agencies' ability to go after these criminal groups, some fear it could be the first step towards U.S. military strikes in Mexican territory. Critics have also described the move as unnecessarily broad and harsh, with many speculating that it could damage relations and disrupt trade with Latin America. Businesses, banks, and buyers could fear possible U.S. prosecution if they knowingly or unknowingly have any transactions that touch the world of the cartels. As it stands, the Mexican government is in a difficult position. Despite what Trump described as wonderful and very friendly calls with Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, he has repeatedly claimed that Mexico is essentially run by the cartels. Comments like this can put a serious strain on the U.S.-Mexico relationship, as it highlights the contrast in how both countries intend to deal with cartels. Some analysts believe that Mexico's leadership would prefer diplomatic solutions rather than confrontation, as past military responses have often resulted in more violence rather than stability. Former Mexican President Andrés López Obrador emphasized on using a strategy of dialogue with cartels instead of violence. His focus was on implementing social programs to reduce cartel violence rather than direct military confrontation. Trump, on the other hand, prefers a more militarized strategy. So if the U.S. president or any U.S. administration takes unilateral action against cartels, Mexico would have little leverage to resist, especially given its economic dependence on the United States. Right now, it remains uncertain how this pending war will end, but we'll continue to watch as the events unfold. What are your thoughts on El Chapo's warning to U.S. troops? Let me know in the comments section. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, then be sure to click on this next card on your screen.